I know pastors are supposed to know how to pronounce all these things, but if I spent all my time learning how to pronounce these, I wouldn't get anything done. So bear with me on some of these names. If you think they're pronounced different, you're probably right. Chapter 10, verse 1. Now, Adonai Zedek, king of Jerusalem. And yes, you heard that right. There was a people that lived in Jerusalem before the Israelites and the tribe of Judah. They had heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and were living near them. He and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. Now, that sounds like a redundant statement, doesn't it? When you talk about a royal city, you're talking about one that has maybe quite a few other towns around it, and this is the main city. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. You know, this is the first time we've heard that. Gibeon gave up before they ever fought by asking for the treaty, knowing that they were going to get wiped out unless something out of their control happened. All right. So, Adonai Zedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, that's a good name, Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. Now, just for the sake of clarity, these kings had never been allied with one another. Most likely they were fighting each other all the time. You remember in, I think it's 2 Samuel, when David, it's stated about David, it says, in the spring when kings go to war, David didn't go. Well, they had a schedule, and they were going to keep it. What do you think galvanized these 5 kings against Gibeon? Besides the obvious, what do you think galvanized them? Fear? They're not Joshua. Maybe we can win this one. I mean, that's what they might have been thinking. Maybe if we all go at once. I mean, how do you talk people into doing something that they should believe by this time is certain death? Although they were thinking the same thing as Gibeon maybe. We're going to die anyway. Let's just get it over with. Who knows what's going through their mind? So what's going on in the mind if you are sitting inside Gibeon? What do you think they're thinking at this point? Uh-oh. Well, we tricked them into making peace with us. Do you think they'll come? Yeah. Verse 6, the Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal. Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal and with his entire army, including all of his best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, listen to this. The Lord said to Joshua, you remember each of the times that we talk about what's next. When we talked about crossing the Jordan, we talked about Jericho, we talked about Ai. Each time, God's either at the forefront of what's happening or he's an afterthought. He's at the forefront here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Joshua got them all together and said, we're going to go. It means that the writer is saying, this is what happened. Now, let me tell you the whole story. It's not as if they got up, they started marching and headed out, and then God spoke. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, who defeated them in a great victory at Gibeon. Israel pursued them all along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah, or Makkedah. There's two K's there. I don't know if it makes a difference, but that's what we're going to say. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky, and more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jashar. Evidence, by the way. That's one of the reasons that statement is there. It's not just that Joshua says it, it's that it was written in another place as well. If God stopped the sun for Joshua and the children of Israel, it means everybody that was alive witnessed it. Now, you can argue this isn't real, it's just an overstatement, or you could say all kinds of things. Whether it was 24 hours or 10 or 8 or whatever it was, God moved on the behalf of his people in a spectacular way that had never been done before. Jeff? Excuse me. Like a slingshot, yep. Yeah. Right. Yes. That's right. Yep. I think that there are ways that God has been moving all along to show us, like it says in Romans chapter 1, that he is really there throughout all of creation with its anomalies and its constancy. I mean, when we consider creation from a purely scientific standpoint, if you are a scientist today and you study the known facts against the theories that are out there, because they're only theories, they're not facts. I read this week, I saw a picture, I'm sure it's just a gimmick to get me to click on it. These teeth were found and they're 1 billion years old or whatever. It was something crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't prove a negative and you can't prove a positive at all by saying the age of something. Do you know if you look up carbon-14 dating, for instance, it's not really scientific at all. It's not. They don't have anything that they can date that's old enough to... carbon-14's half-life is 5,000 years. Its quarter life is 11,000 years. You don't have anything 11,000 years old to test it on, so you don't know. They decide what the date is going to say based on their extrapolation. Now, if we're not careful, we do that as well in a spiritual sense. I don't think we need to worry about how long it was or how to prove it. The principle is the same. You can believe that this is an overstatement and still go to heaven. But why not just believe what it says? You know? Jeff? Yeah, when they found they didn't call him a Neanderthal, they called him the Iceman back in the 80s, yeah? Yes. If we're not careful, we want so badly to prove that science is more than what it is. It still amazes me. I always ask young people when they're in school, have you taken physical science yet? Okay, what are the 3 laws of thermodynamics? Object in motion tends to stay in motion unless it's acted upon. An object at rest tends to stay at rest unless it's acted upon. What's the third one? It's called entropy. Everything is running down. It's getting worse. But you're supposed to believe the science. So how then would evolution be able to be where something's getting better and better and better? It would be the opposite of everything science tells us is true. Now, they're going to say, well, that just has to do with, physical science and gravity and all those things. I don't know. And they would say the same thing about this statement, and they would say, well, if it was true that God stopped the earth from spinning, then everyone would have flown out into space and no one would be here. Well, it would still have gravity, but that would be their argument. And I understand if you want science to prove there is no God so you can do whatever you want, then I understand why you want to believe that. But there are things that I don't want to do now because I've seen the consequences. In the scripture, the principle is that we're looking at, is God is always there working on our behalf, especially when we have chosen to obey Him completely. Joshua was completely surrendered to God's plan and His purpose. Bill?